Hello, and welcome to ACCA's Ethics for a Better World talks that we have organized to mark the Global Ethics Day. Global Ethics Day, of course, just happened on the Wednesday, 18th of October, and it has been a very important date on the calendar for the past 10 years. From our perspective, it is an important opportunity for us to shine a light on the very critical ethical role that is played by professional accountants around the world. My name is Chun Wee, and I'm the Regional Policy and Insights Lead for ACCA in Asia Pacific. I'm hosting this talk from Singapore as part of the week-long series. Today we're talking about a very important topic, ethical leadership. And to help us cover this very important topic, we are delighted to have with us Mr. Rajeev Peshawaria, the CEO of Stewardship Asia. So Rajeev, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the very first question, Rajeev. You have been looking at this topic of ethical leadership for the past 30 years. And we are today seeing rapid technological advancement, including AI, that everyone is looking at nervously and excitedly. We have the climate crisis that is upon us, and we have regulatory changes. So I'm very interested to know from your perspective, how has the meaning and importance of ethical leadership evolved with the times?
Yeah, so you mentioned a few things already. We have to answer this question in the context of a few mega trends that we are seeing unfolding right now. Some of them you already mentioned: climate change, socioeconomic inequality, cyber vulnerability. You mentioned AI, right? So those are the three main ones. Right. And then in addition to that, there's two more things happening. The world is a lot more interconnected and interdependent today, right? COVID-19 taught us that no one is safe until everyone is safe. So no one can ignore that interdependence and that interconnectedness. And finally, the fifth mega trend is we are all naked. Thanks to the death of privacy, everything you do as an individual or as an organization is in full, plain view of the world. So if you think about today's times in terms of those five things, how has the meaning of ethics and ethical leadership evolved? Well, in the past, observing the law and not doing anything wrong was ethical. So you ran a business or you ran whatever your profession and you followed the law and you also followed the cultural norms of decency, you were ethical. Not enough anymore. Today we live in existential times, of existential challenges, and today not doing anything about it is unethical. So in addition to observing the law, in addition to doing the right thing by cultural norms, you also have to take proactive action to contribute to the solutions for climate change, cyber vulnerability. Just sitting it out is unethical by itself. So that to me is the biggest change.
Right. I really like the point about contributing actively and just sitting back and just not doing anything is no longer ethical. I think that's a great point. Rajeev, I remember reading this article that was published in the Forbes magazine. You wrote in September 2020. And you wrote, and I quote, "People behind white-collar crime do not deliberately plan on becoming criminals, and they are ordinary people like you and me." Mm-hmm. So how do people who do not have malicious intent, who see themselves as ordinary, decent people, end up going down this unethical, questionable path? And importantly, how do leaders avoid going down the same route?
The short answer is that we all come with the default wiring of the brain and a default understanding of what we mean by happiness. And people who are susceptible to going down that rabbit hole of unethical action are the ones who don't question that default wiring and don't proactively rewire the brain. So that's the short answer. Let me explain. What happens is we all think that happiness is wealth, power, someone else's affection, right? And life is all about maximizing net worth. That's the default. And the default wiring of the brain is I need to take as much from the world rather than give. Now, if that's the default wiring with which we all are born, right. And most people don't realize it and they spend their entire life with that default setting. Now, if you keep that default setting and you find yourself in a culture like Enron, right, where it's all about making money at any cost, no matter what. You want to be, like as a human, you have a sense of belonging. You want to belong to the culture. So you are susceptible to doing what they ask you to do. The other thing is that, most people, when they do something wrong, white collar crime, they don't do it because of deliberate thought. When they get caught, they say, oh my God, what was I thinking? Why did I do it? Because, the brain, through our 5 senses, we receive 11 million bits per second of information. And we only process about 16 of those bits out of the 11 billion consciously.
Right.
So the default behavior is from the default wiring of the brain. You see what I mean? Which is, I want more, and happiness is having more. Now, how do you avoid that trap? You question that. And you ask yourself, how do I need to change that wiring? You need to have absolutely honest clarity about what are those values that you believe in, that you will never compromise no matter what happens. Right. And then you have to deliberately practice those values. So one of the things a friend of mine used to do is he would have interns every year, and he would make them do a random act of kindness every day. Okay. And report back on Monday morning the 7 random acts of kindness they did every day for 7 days. Right. 90 days, that was the challenge. A random act of kindness, small little act for somebody. Right. So I asked him, why for 90 days, and why would you have them talk about it every Monday morning? He says if they can do that for 90 days, they will permanently rewire the brain from taking to giving. Right. So that's what I mean by understanding what your values are and practicing them deliberately. Right. Another one is forgiveness. Very hard, but you have to practice forgiving. And it gets easier and easier until it becomes the default response.
Interesting.
So most people fall into the trap of white-collar crime because they do not question the default wiring we come with.
Right. Okay. So being very deliberate about rewiring, that's a really interesting point.
And rewiring happens. Yeah. Now, science tells us that there is something called neuroplasticity, which means we can change the brain as much as we want. And it happens through visualization and deliberate practice.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. And Rajeev, you mentioned culture earlier about Enron. And we know the famous saying, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know to what extent you agree with that statement. But my question is, how do leaders cultivate an ethical culture that permeates the organization and maximize the chance of the right thing being done at the right time most of the time?
Whenever somebody quotes that quote to me, I say the answer is skip breakfast altogether. Intermittent fasting is good for you. Then
I agree.
Then culture will have nothing to eat. But on a more serious note, culture is built again deliberately, and there are 4 steps to it. Okay. One is to articulate the values and the values-based behaviors that you want everybody in the organization to exhibit. That's step 1. Articulate the values that you want everybody to exhibit. Second, as leaders of the organization, walk the talk all the time, because people are hierarchical. They look up to authority for clues to respond, how to behave themselves, right? Third, reinforce the behavior through rewards and punishment. Very, very important. A lot of companies will articulate values and even sometimes do step 2, but they don't do step 3, which is to reinforce your performance management system, your promotion system, your bonus systems. Everything should reflect living those values or not. And 4, measure periodically. So at Stewardship Asia, we've created a tool to measure the strength of your ethical, values-based culture. Right. So every now and then you can do a quick check as to how we are doing on culture, and then get the management team and the board together and say, okay, what are the strengths of our culture? What do we need to do differently, if anything, to reinforce it? Right. So again, culture building is easy. It's those 4 steps, but the sincerity with which you do it makes all the difference. How strong and how ethical your culture is going to be.
Right. Yeah. Great. And as we approach the end of this conversation, let me pose to you 3 quick rapid-fire questions just to get your immediate response, Rajeev. There are 17 SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. Which one do you personally feel is the most important one today?
For me, it's clear. It's quality education.
Right.
Everything begins with awareness. Awareness and education leads to behavior.
Okay.
And if my education and awareness lacks, then my behavior will be lacking.
Right.
Simple.
Quality education. Which of the following is true for you? So ethical leadership is either 1, a great competitive advantage, or 2, the baseline condition for long-term survival of the company. 1 or 2.
If I had to choose one, it'd be 2.
Okay.
baseline. Because in today's naked society where everything is totally visible, it's a baseline requirement. If you are not, then you'll be eliminated.
Okay.
But my longer answer would be both.
Right. Now, last question. What is the most critical step to addressing ethical dilemmas when they arise?
So whenever you are in the case of a dilemma, if you have to ask yourself a simple question, if I acted according to my values, or if we as a company acted according to our values, how will we deal with this dilemma? 99.9% of the times you will get the right answer.
Great. Now, can we now have your closing thoughts in 10 seconds, please?
So, I've studied white-collar crime quite a bit. I have studied good leadership and bad leadership quite a bit. The one thing I'd like to leave you with is, if you haven't already, keep asking yourself these two questions until you find the answers. Question 1, what are my values that I will never compromise no matter how tough the consequences might be? And B, based on those values, what is my purpose in life?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rajeev. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure our viewers is enjoying it like I do. The series of Ethics for a Better World can be found in the ACCA YouTube channel. And as you know, by now we're launching a new talk every day on a different ethical topic. And don't miss out on tomorrow's session coming to you from Nigeria, talking about the important topic of ethics and the public sector. So thank you so much, and goodbye.